Today we are at the fifth Sunday of Epiphany, and we're about to end. Last Sunday in Epiphany is Transfiguration. Epiphany, which is the manifestation or the witness of God to the world, starting on the day of Epiphany, or Three Kings Day, the visit of the Magi, where Jesus is revealed to the Gentiles. It sort of starts and ends. And the bookends that start and end it are the baptism of Jesus and the transfiguration of Jesus. And but in both encounters, you have something very, very special going on, a manifestation going on, a revealing going on, a voice from heaven going on. The transfiguration next week is, the lectionary loves the transfiguration so much it has it twice in the lectionary. Once just before Lent, which is now, where it's chronologically out of place because we've just baptized Jesus, and once in Pentecost, where it sort of kind of more fits chronologically his journey towards Jerusalem. But it's the idea of the revealing to the world, and that fits, I guess, the reason why Archbishop Foley Beach of the ACNA proclaimed that this Sunday was World Mission Sunday. What is World Mission Sunday? I hear you ask. Well, actually, it's a Catholic convention by Pope Pius XI from 1926 is when he decided that on Sunday, although his Sunday is in October, but won't worry about the date too much. There'll be a day set aside where the sermon will be about world missions. And why did this Pope decide this? He's actually the same Pope who added to the calendar Christ the King Day. And now, why did he add these two special days to the calendar? Because in the 1920s, he's watching the sort of rising nationalism coming up. We've had World War I, everyone's devastated by that. They've lost their faith in God, and they're clinging to clinging to men, the inventions of men to look for their salvation. And it's not going to work. So he said, no, don't look for your fascist dictators, look to Christ the King. And the world's going all pagan, so we better get out there and do some mission work. So those were his additions, and they've actually been included in the Common Lectionary, the one that we are following. And so I'm going to blend a little bit from the Gospels and into World Mission, into the Epiphany. So it's really going to be a little bit kind of all over the place, but that's just the way I like it. So let's have a look at the Gospel portion and see how all the other texts line in there, because they actually all line up into serving the world. And it's the real common theme that I saw in the lectionary this Sunday was the idea of service and being a servant, particularly a servant to the world with the good news of Jesus the Messiah. So the Gospel portion, just to keep it in context, it's on the Sabbath. Like, we're in Capernaum, Kafar in Hebrew, and it's right on the shores of the Galilee. If anybody's ever been there, in fact, if Father Rick had been able to come, if we hadn't actually had this big war, then I would have taken Father Rick to Kafar. We would have actually seen the very house that this actually occurred in, and then within 30 seconds, we would have put our feet in the Galilee, sat down, and began to contemplate the wonder of what Jesus is doing in this site. It's well preserved by the Franciscans. So we'd like to thank them for that. A little piece of terra sancta that they're looking after so well. Kafar Nahum means the village of Nahum, not the prophet Nahum, some guy called Nahum. Nahum in Hebrew means rest and comfort. It's the village of rest and comfort. Okay? A really cool name to have your disciples live, especially your mother-in-law. And there's a big synagogue there. I mean, the synagogue is impressive, and The one that you physically see today is built on top of the one that was there at Jesus's day, and you see the floor plan. It's a great little piece of archaeology. You can go inside and actually imagine yourself that Jesus has just done his teaching in the synagogue. He's healed a person who was demon possessed, and then our text says, typically in Mark's fashion, immediately, as soon, right? Snappy little dress of this guy. They come out of the synagogue and they entered the house of Simon Peter. And you go, wow, that seems pretty amazing. And when you actually go there, you realize how close all the houses are. You literally leave the synagogue and right in front of you is a door to someone's house. Okay? It's exactly like that. The Gospels are actually reflecting real archaeology. These people were there, and so they left the synagogue, and immediately they were in Simon Peter's mother-in-law's abode. And you look at the house, the actual floor plan, you realize not that big. Okay, the top number of people you can physically get inside this building would be 40, and that's packing it in. Okay, so we're not talking about massive Billy Graham crusades going on here. It's actually more humble than that. A lot of what you see Jesus doing is really humble, starting with just a few people, but affecting the entire world. You already have the parables, the mustard seed, the little piece of leaven, or small pieces of wheat growing even up amongst tares. You can't stop this thing. You after doing his healing and doing his teaching, and I'm always not uninspired, that would be the right word. I get really annoyed with our gospel writers who tell us that Jesus taught and then put a full stop at the end of the sentence. And they never explain what it is he taught. And that's infuriating. I don't know about you guys, but when I get to heaven, then all the gospel writers are just going to run to the other side of heaven because Aaron's going to come and talk to them and say, come on, people, that was really, really unfair. Jesus goes in to the house with his disciples. Doesn't say what he's going to do there. Okay? I'm not worried about that. What happens is Jesus is about to serve. Now, he's a rabbi. He's got his servants are what we call disciples. A disciple in Hebrew is a student, so they're learning from him. And in Hebrew, the word servant is the same word as slave. And it just infuriates scholars because the Bible doesn't seem to have a nice, clear sentence that says, thou shalt not own slaves. Okay, especially when you get to the New Testament and poor old Paul's running around saying, I'm a slave, you're all slaves to Jesus. Although we like to translate as servant, sounds nicer. The Hebrew eved, servant, is also the word for slave. It's also the same word for worship. Okay, avodah, and the same word for work. So all of it seems to be linked together. And while the Hebrew Bible doesn't ban slavery, it certainly says this is not the way humans are supposed to treat each other. So while the Hebrew Bible did allow people to be owned by other people, you were meant to set them free every 7 years. After 7 years of work, on the 8th, you were to be set free. That was unique amongst the ancient cultures. It was a sign for people to say, this is not actually meant to be the final life of a person. Because in the ancient world, especially in the Hebrew Bible, in fact, only in the Hebrew Bible, there's no jails. Okay, so when you had crime and punishment, you actually had to enact the punishment immediately. So if you were found guilty of murder and your punishment was execution, you did it immediately. If you had stolen somebody's chariot and you were caught, you owed them a chariot. And if you couldn't pay back the chariot, well, then there was no jail to put you. You worked as a servant, an indentured servant, to pay off your debt, and that. But after 7 years, you went free anyway. It was not meant to be your bit. So the New Testament approaches this idea of service to people, and there's a big culture of service, of serving, of servants, and it's a form of work, and oddly enough, also a form of worship. Peter's mother-in-law is sick with a fever. What sort of fever? Not sure. Fever unto death? Not sure. Would she have gotten better? Probably. But they tell the Lord, Lord, my mother-in-law is sick, so she can't cook any food or something. And I'm a man, and I'm really good at fishing and nothing else. And so Jesus heals her. He serves her. And what does she do? She immediately serves him. In fact, all of them. And so what we see in this gospel passage is everybody's serving everyone. And that's exactly the way that you and I have to help missionize the world, by going out and acknowledging that we are servants, we are slaves for Christ. We do our worship of him through work and service for others. Then the text goes on to say, at evening when the sun had set. Now, why does the text have to say that? Because a whole bunch of people from this town are now going to crowd around Jesus and bring out all their sick and those who are demon possessed. There's two types of healings that are going to go on here. Now, it's the Sabbath. So on the Sabbath, you're not supposed to do any work, right? So most of the town, being good little Jews, okay, would have just waited until the sun had set, which is exactly what the gospel shows us. The sun had gone down. It is now Sunday, okay? So Saturday night has occurred. That's now the day starts in the evening. We're now into Sunday, and everybody is allowed to move around. They're free to start moving around, free to discuss, free to talk, and they bring their ill and those that are demon possessed. They've heard what went on in the synagogue. Probably didn't hear what went on in Simon's mother-in-law's house, but they heard what happened in the synagogue, and so they bring him all of their ill. Now, in the ancient world, there was this definite understanding that some illnesses, not all of them, some illnesses were connected to demonic activity. Not everything, okay? It wasn't that all fate was in the hands of the demonic or something like that. I mean, Jesus actually challenges some people. He says, remember the tower that fell down? Okay, were they any more pure than you guys? Okay, sometimes things just happen. And we don't have to always blame the devil for something. However, death, sickness, disease, they are not original parts of creation. They are a part of the fall. And Jesus, when he comes to fix everything, then part of that also is to fix sickness and the work of the demons. And so we see that here. He cures everybody from their illnesses. He serves. He doesn't have to, but he does so. He's got the best medical plan you've ever seen. Okay, there's the queue might be a little long, but he'll get to you by the end of the day. And demonic activity, there's not a demon he will leave alone, right? God is life, and the enemy is death. And Jesus, being the King of life, the author of life, the sustainer of life, cannot abide demonic activity. So he gets rid of all that too. And for those that watched The Chosen, they sort of have it that Jesus gets quite tired while doing this. Very possible that the Lord, expended some energy. It took a toll on him. The text doesn't say it per se, other than he does look for a quiet place for prayer and retreat. And Jesus does this even before the sun gets up. He does it alone, and he looks for a place to pray quietly. Now, that brings all kinds of interesting theological discussions about, like, who's he praying to? Right? Isn't he God? And why would he need to talk to himself like this? There's this, it creates these interesting relationships. But you've heard me say this before. In Hebrew, prayer is reflexive. Prayer is something that you do to yourself and is incredibly valuable for ourselves. And Jesus also prays. And he sought a quiet place. Now, we often, it doesn't mean he doesn't pray in public. He does. He was in a synagogue. There's lots of public prayers there. He goes to the temple. Lots of public prayers there. But he does also seek the idea of being quiet. And he teaches us this in Matthew when he discusses prayer, and he says, don't pray long-winded prayers. Keep them short, sharp, to the point. Find yourself a quiet place and pray in secret. And God, who sees everything done in secret, he's going to know and give you a reward. Jesus looks for this quiet time of prayer. In our modern world, we often read our Bibles in our quiet times, and then we pray often in public a lot. Although in Jesus' day it was flipped around. You found quiet times to pray. You didn't have a Bible, so you didn't actually read the Bible quite on your own. You read it in groups. When Simon goes and finds him, they say, "Well, you're a really popular, boss, and everyone's looking for you." And what does he say? He says, "We will now go to the other towns. My service is going to go beyond this town as well, because that is why I was sent." In fact, Luke 4 spreads it out a little bit more. It actually says in Luke 4:42, it says, "I must go to the other towns to preach the good news of the kingdom of heaven, because that is why I was sent." Right? There's this idea of him being the servant and the one who was sent. And he's going to go and serve, even though he's the king, the Lord, the creator, the master, and the Lord of life. Everyone should be serving him. But he turns around and serves everybody else. And how does that tie in to some of the other readings for the day? Well, on World Missions Day, when we're contemplating that part of our calling is to go into all the world with the gospel of the truth, the good news. And as we go out, we are going to encounter the bad guys. And some of those we'll be able to defeat by doing a good old-fashioned demon slaying. But unfortunately, some of them might even hurt us physically. Well, what is that going to do for us? Is that going to stop us? Is that going to hold us back? Is that going to cause us fear? And so you get the epistle where Paul is reflecting, I'm a servant. I could be doing this and getting paid for this, but I'm actually going to give it for free. And I'm doing it for everyone. To the Jews, I became Jewish. To the Gentiles, I became as a Gentile. To the weak, I became as a weak. Now, many scholars will come along and go, "Look, Paul's so hypocritical. Look at him, absolute hypocrite. Is he Jewish? Is he a Gentile? Is he under the Torah? Is he not under the Torah? What's the deal?" And I think they've completely missed what he was saying. Right? First of all, Paul never once told Jews to become Gentiles, and he never told Gentiles to become Jews. Right? He even circumcised Timothy. And when he was in Jerusalem in Acts, he participated in religious festivals, including sacrifices and oaths, Jewish sacred oaths. Now, how do I use this in a modern way to prove my point? And here's what I think. No one becomes a Muslim to reach Muslims. Right? There will be Christians who are Christian missionaries to Muslims, but they don't become Muslims to reach Muslims. Okay, so think of it like that. Paul is changing the way he talks. If you were going to go out and reach Muslims, you would adapt perhaps the way you dress. You might adapt the way you talk about the Quran, about Muhammad. You might learn a little bit about Islamic traditions so that you don't offend people, and you would modify the way you speak. Still tell the truth, still say Jesus is the Messiah, But you wouldn't embrace Islam and become a Muslim to try and reach Muslims. That's not working. Right? So I think that's what Paul means here is he is trying to serve everyone, and he does so willingly, and he does so without taking any money. When you have a look at the prophet Isaiah 40, Isaiah 40 is that pivotal chapter in all of Isaiah. The first 39 chapters, 1 to 39, God kind of really angry with Israel. Right? It's all kinds of things are happening, and there's lots of judgment and doom and gloom. You think, oh my gosh, it's terrible. From 40 to 66, 65, 66, you get God saying, no, comfort, comfort. I've got some great news for you, and I'm going to come and make everything good. I'm going to ask you to prepare the way. And preparation, what is preparation? In Isaiah 40, the mountains shake. Okay, the valleys are lifted up, and mountains are brought low, and things are smoothed out. Creation itself is modified in preparation for the Lord, and there's also the preparation of what we do to prepare for the King, hearts and repentance and things like that. In ancient Babylonian literature, we read that whenever there was a visiting king, you would actually go out and prepare the ground for him. You really would. You would actually prepare, make sure that the road was straight, and you'd get everything that was messy out of the way, and then you would go out to meet the king, and you'd process in with him. And so Isaiah is using very similar language. The earth moves itself to prepare, and we also move ourselves to prepare for the king. But what is this king going to do when he comes? He's going to fix everything that's broken, everything that he's just said was wrong. He's going to make right. He's going to heal. He's going to preach good news to the poor. He's going to fight back the demons. He's going to bring back life. He's going to chase away the darkness. And all of that he wants his disciples to also do. He wants to show, I am serving. I'm the king. You should be serving me. And I'm going to ask you to by serving others. That's how we're going to affect and change the world. And this world mission, okay, where there's a little group of people that started in the Galilee, spread out around the world, okay, still going after 2,000 years. It's not all immediate and fast. Some people like to always think that it should be. And when you read Isaiah, that last verse in the Isaiah portion that we read, okay, we're often thinking, you know what? I'll start with the Lord with a crawl, a very slow walk. And then I'll build up into a run, and my strides will get long, and I'll get bolder and better in the scriptures, and more confident in sharing the gospel, and more dynamic in the power of the Spirit. And then I'll fly, and I'll soar like eagles. And walk, run, fly. Isaiah flips it the other way around. It's fly, run, walk. You slow down. What? Why would you slow down? In fact, that's often the way you find out in new believers. A new believer comes to faith in Jesus, and they want to go out and change the world. In fact, they're going to go save everybody instantly. I kid you not. When Mordecai, our little dear rabbi, came to faith, where was he the very next day? He was in yeshivas thinking, I'm going to go save the Jews. Okay. And what did they do? They beat the crap out of him. All right. It didn't quite work. But you got to admit, you got to love the passion, right? It's people get really excited. But what the prophet is saying, he's saying, look, wait on the Lord. And what does wait actually mean? The actual Hebrew word there is kava, and it's from the verb, it's from the word hope. And hope takes time. Hope springs eternal, right? And so sometimes as the world is looking like it's a bit of a mess, and it's a bit of a mess. The challenge is don't give up. Walk and hope and share the light and serve and love that one person at a time. Jesus was healing one at a time. He didn't just sort of walk outside, snap his fingers, and everybody in the village was healed. It took time, one at a time, and ministering to each and every single person. Whether it was a special disease, whatever it was, we fixed that up. And whatever, if it was a demon, we certainly beat that guy as well. And we made them all whole. And then what did they do? Served each other. Well, definitely Peter's mother-in-law did. She gives us a great example. If something great happened to her, she turns around and does something loving and great for somebody else. And that's a challenge for all of us this day on World Mission Day. Yes, fly, yes, run, but definitely walk. It's not a short distance, brothers and sisters. We're in a marathon. It's a marathon. And the thing is, Jesus has already run the marathon for us and with us, and still continues to do so. So walk, because that's the distance is long. Amen.